I had been rereading Heidegger's essay about the question concerning technology, and it suddenly occurred to me that Minecraft would be an ideal way to teach that, and that you could use things like the end in Minecraft, which isn't really an end, to talk about the difference between aim and goals and psychoanalysis and all of those kinds of things. So after I had taught the class once as a fairly conventional class, I thought, let's try something really radically different, and I built a huge chunk of the coursework around a group project which involved building things in Minecraft. So I set all of that up on the Tag Vanilla server, and I played intensively on the vanilla server for about 4 months. And that was about the same period as this server went live. So I missed the whole first wave of activity and colonization. So when I finally logged on, after spending 4 months playing vanilla Minecraft, it was kind of the shock of my life that I had to relearn everything over again. And mostly what I did was I cowered in my bedroom at Flower Hill and mined until I figured out how to play the game. And that was when I discovered this hill on the main island, and started to think about what I could possibly do up here that would be interesting or different. And this is a scale model of Mies van der Rohe's gas station on Nuns Island, which is the most beautiful gas station in the world. It's this kind of amazing piece of modernist architecture that's been recovered as a kind of cultural center. So the blueprints are fairly easy to find online. So I looked at a couple of versions of the schematics and downloaded them so I could start building them, and started to think about what it would mean to try to do this in Minecraft. I spent many evenings killing the spirits of undead pagan kings again to collect glowstone to make neon lights for my modernist gas station. And it was at that point that it occurred to me really how strange this game is, so the ways in which all of the layers of metaphors are sort of competing with each other, and we just kind of take that in stride as we go about our business. You asked me if I was aware that somebody had nuked this place at one point, and I knew about it, but what I thought was funny was that they bothered to restore it before I could see it. It's a power thing, right? Partly I'm a professor, and I suspect that they were worried about what I might have thought or what I would have done. But I just thought it was really funny that the nuke had been used here, and then the house had been restored from backup before I actually had time to see it. I got interested in the ways in which the game restricts certain kinds of activities in order to encourage you to do particular things when you start playing. So I started looking at all of the kinds of machines that people had built that aren't really described in the game anywhere, but are implicit in how the thing works. This thing is the infamous chicken cube, which because chickens are really the only species in the game whose breeding can be fully automated, it produces cooked chicken. And this thing is really sort of at the heart of the first set of experiments that I was doing with my undergrads in terms of research, but also as a sort of provocation. Like, this is a really sterile and horrible looking machine. It's clinical and cold, and it processes chickens like an asset. There's no sentimental quality about it. That what I was sort of curious about was the way that players think about ethics in the game. Mm-hmm. And the point that I was trying to make by this is that sentimentally, we think very differently about, say, the cute chicken and or ducks in Minecraft than we do about skeletons or other kinds of monsters, which we will happily slaughter. And the real ethical questions are the questions about the interpersonal relations in the game. Like, are you building something that changes the experience of the game for better or for worse for other players? So all of these machines are sort of occasions for thought. So this is the inside of the bone crusher. We'll go out and take a look at it in a minute, but it was built at the same time as the BFC, the Big Fried Chicken Company, and I built it very, very quietly just to see if my students would notice, because they started to become sort of interested in the problems of overproduction. And the fact that the thing looked like a fast food franchise was troubling to them, even though it was designed not for profit, but to actually allow other players to have access to resources that were, somewhat difficult to get on the server and to get on with the business of doing more interesting things. So what this thing does is there's a way up there, you can sort of see it glinting there. There's a skeleton spawner that I found. This was the remains of an old battle tower. So I found this spawner and I built this machine around it, and it works basically the same as any other kind of mob grinder. What it does is it effectively processes skeletons. So keep an eye on those guys. I'm just going to flick this switch. So all of the various skeletons that are produced by that spawner get shunted down here, and then a system of pistons squashes them. There's some more already. This thing that really gets going. And everything gets shunted over to these chests again by a series of pipes. So the primary reason for doing this wasn't so much about gathering resources, but as to sort of make a point about the way that sentimentality in the game works, because nobody batted an eye about crushing skeletons, but people got all upset about cooking chickens. I'm not entirely sure that I made my point about the difference between sentiment and ethics, but you go outside this thing and look at it from the front, and it's a giant skull. This was the design of a student in my undergraduate class, and he basically put it up overnight beside my house as a kind of joke. But I thought the impulse behind it was interesting, because while it looks like a kind of corporate for-profit chicken franchise, the intent is actually to supply players with resources for free that will allow them to get on with the more interesting aspects of playing the game. What I was inviting them to do was to sort of think about group production, because they kept playing like individuals. One of them would build the system a certain way, and then another one would change it, and then they would get into these conflicts over what it was they were doing. So partly it was supposed to be about project management as much as anything else, and how to work with other people. I see, again, all of this has happened without my intervention. The chicken rebellion that was staged out here in the lobby, there was a dispenser was left here with eggs in it, so chickens would breed in here, and there were equal rights for animals signs all over. And it was funny, but I thought what was more interesting was this structure over here, which Gersand, one of the students on the team, built. This was her ethical chicken house, and it's currently empty because, again, for reasons that are kind of unclear to me, she killed off all of her chickens at some point. But this was full of happy free-range chickens, and again, I was delighted when this appeared, because what actually happened was a form of argument by construction. She built an alternative to the BFC beside the thing itself as a way of making a kind of point, which I thought was a really interesting moment. But and as a result, she's gone off to read things that I've sent her to look at, like Donna Haraway's work about talking to non-humans, and thinking about all of the questions that technology raises about ethics and relationships. It struck me that what was happening was like a kind of process of critique was playing itself out, but we don't really have a good critical language for talking about, why this sort of thing happens or how it happens. So that's part of what's interesting to me about how these games work as well. But what this is really is it's an occasion for thinking about the dynamics of gameplay and the way that people think about property and about how you're supposed to play and so on and so forth, rather than anything to get indignant about. On the one hand, the kind of stupid pleasure of playing a video game is not something that I want to lose, but I also don't want to be in a position where I'm turning off my ability to think about what it is that I'm doing, or what play might actually mean. So it's about trying to hold those two things in tension with each other, because really the whole purpose of game studies for me is to think about how, here are these incredibly complex cultural objects, video games that now make more money as an industry than film, and we don't really have a kind of adequate language for describing them yet. So how do we do that, right? How do we think about what we're doing in a critical way?